I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. And are today's oyster, and we meet it practically sparing. And negotiating to develop buckets of the so-called mayor's plan appeared in the American media. And you respect the plan of the American administration with one thing. And Russian. Today, we are going to talk about another important intelligence. All these stories are tied from the plan. In principle, I am already saying on a one-time basis that the whole story is not allegedly visible before the mayor in Ukraine. Before the peacekeeping special operation of the presidential administration of Russia and the Russian special services. I was with her directly on myself. It is possible to conduct sanctions against the main Russian naphtha companies Rosneft and Lukoil, and to waste the dumping of Ukraine away from the period of Russian-Ukrainian guilt. And most importantly, so that Trump sanctions and does not put pressure on our temples. Thanks to the President of the Russian Federation for the test of foreign policy. The diplomats of the Radian School Yuri Ushakov have been highlighted. Vykodovtsy, pseudo-plan, and Ostap Bender of the Russian presidential administration. Special representative of the president Kirill Dmitriev, having seen him Ishim, I would say. To a similar character of the church of the administration of President Trump, Steve with, like the mind with Jared Kernopoklov's. And the Russian plan is laid out from the Russian Mova on the working style of President Donald Trump, and as we know, exactly on reading greedy documents. And after it became clear that the Russian administration had not reached its fullness. Trump is also going to implement sanctions about Rosneft and Lukoil. Kirill Dmitriev organized access to information about the American media about the 28 points of the wrong Trump plan. And after it became clear that they were not ready to receive tough ultimatums from the state to the address of Ukraine, and the draft peace plan was being cut up by the Moroccan and Ukrainian delegations, I was extremely absolutely leaking in Moscow. I am all of you, we have talked about telephone conversations with the advisor to the President of the Russian Federation, Yuri Ushakov, the author of the Plan of the Mine, and Steve Witcha. So the signal of the Russian presidential administration, of the American one will not be, and the reason, and will not be covered up. And ours, we can see up to an amateur play. Today, the head actor of Russia, President Putin, appeared on the stage. Soon, with your stay at the tables of Kyrgyzstan in Bashkent at the summit, you will be able to persuade the organization about collective carelessness in order to get stuck with journalists. Moreover, 7,500 an hour of oyster was allocated not to the stow, not to the bag between Russia and Kyrgyzstan, to some crazy international problems, but to Trump's own plan. It began in me, forgetting about home preparations, the torture of Putin's head, I would say, court reporter Pavel Zarubin, without testing his Trump's washing plan. And then everything continued, because practically all Russian journalists were a participant of those from Oyster and Espresso. Tested Tilke process plan. Well, I'll say buckets that the kind of Putin's behavior in principle tells us about how they will develop. Maybe you will have a month. Or maybe the Rocky of Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Well, Putin extremely buckets saying that I was not with a specific project to the contract, but on the burr. The attempt was sold and discussed and formulated residual. And I am Russian officials, Putin, having sent everything to the fact that before the visit to Alaska for American officials. And a visit where you are all in with 28 points. And Putin on galoshes was still handed over to the Kremlin via TV channels, not between the American and Ukrainian delegation. And there another 28 points came out among themselves. It was necessary to divide 4 warehouses in Ukraine. And this was transferred to Russia. It's also a tick that Russia has not seen the American and Ukrainian delegations far away. The draft of the Myra Agreement and Putin's chairs, which can be laid down as the basis of Maybit. The fact that we are still bashing the Russian president, I am the Ukrainian speech is not elected from the threshold. About Trump's positions, but we are ready to talk them into the distance. And the topic is Putin's idea. To what else Trump adds in the deadline, it is absolutely the power of the president of the Russian Federation. And Putin, so that it happens that we don't have anything, and I dropped out at an hour. The Russian army continued its ideas on the territory of Ukraine and Russian missiles into the Ukrainian energy and infrastructure. I will arm the Russians with a power on the territory not attached to such a porch. And that I have all the ideas for Trump Alaska, then even from the Cobb, and sailed in the fire of porn Ugoda. Firm Putin's direct political plans, the food is not yet the imperious Russian president. The American president sets deadlines, and extorting urgently to please, I am on fire to Putin on the Lashtovanago. Sharpened for a rich war, do not think. And Trump is talking about what is not allegedly a deadline. You happen to be so I am to Putin and need. The Dakiev speech is of a principled nature, says Putin and in general and Bakum. The American side is what's wrong. I was persuading our position to Anchorage and Alaska. Here we definitely need, and seriously says specific speeches, we need everything in a cool way for a diplomatic move. There's another headline on the right to say that Russia is not elected to attack Europe. It sounds funny to us, doesn't it? We were elected by Nikola, but I have already strained in place of the Europeans over and over again. The fact that Putin was elected by Nikola to attack someone, this means that the Russian forces have overgrown at the moment, to a new guilt, to a new attack. And also wants to smell us, let's Zaphis torture Maya. Well, and then I will not go on the situation is long in the ass, tied up with a rasp of leaks, the Europeans are aggressive. The Russians are not aggressive, the prices of Maya are not supposedly significant. And once again about the fact that the Russians are ready and the sustenance of strategic stability, reason with the American. And on the truth Viseva and Putin. Obama still wasn't yak adoring. TPPR declared adoration, to turn to promises and serious persuasion. Come on, I'm Conan Putin. The American Mayan delegation will arrive before Moscow. Here. Putin, notifying on after all, who would be the head of the Russian side of the Ministry of Zakordny. Lavrov on the side of the presidential administration Vladimir Medinsky. What kind of send-off in the Russian-Ukrainian Istanbul, well, and extremely real straight-marked Russian President Yuri Ushakov. Here are three more headline ghosts of Lavrov. Putin does not name, he says that this is the Ministry of off-the-books references. Even before the Zustrichi in Abu Dhabi, Putin still has Russian and Ukrainian buckets behind the chair. You meet the representatives of the special services, but you are more delicate than torture. But here you are not all presented to the administration from the received states. I have already spent buckets for printed contacts in Moscow. And it all became known that the American administration, straining on the fact that you are coming. You're the one who was added. And so the moment is obvious that Putin was also about, and that the Americans will not hurry to come. One of the most important moments was highlighted by Putin. His claims to the entire territory of Donbass are extremely hanging out. Both the chain and Tanya before the wine were asked to the correspondent of the newspaper Kommersant, Andriy Kolesnikov. In fact, Putin's servant for the 2000th lesson has already been 25 rocky in the post, as a rule. I ask such are tortures for the Russian president. It is all distributed in the Kremlin way. You will stand on the fact that the territorial torture in the frequent Donbass, I will be Visheno here 3 times. And cool like this would be up to the edge of the part. Putin, having seen the chain of torture, in order for me to talk about the fact that he absolutely does not want to see the group. And even in contagious of some meaning, these propositions turned Russia firm before the group and the prosthesis. And I imagine riding to the podium in Ukraine. Here. And this torture of Donbass will tell absolutely specifically. It's easier, and I'm still in the temple of Ukraine pit of the purchased territories, about the stage of taking the battles. We will not reach the dropped Shlyak. The axis is all. And I think that you perfectly understand, it is not easier to say the President of the Russian Federation. Russia does not collect the kind of kidney pepper Putin's plan, declared another 24th fierce, 2020 other rock. Control over the entire territory of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine at the boundaries of their administrative cordons. And there can be no such thing as false arguments from Putin's point of view. According to the Ukrainian army will not leave the regions Yekhiva is defending today. Why is this so important for Putin? Not to the fact that he needs Donbass, but to the fact that the Russian Federation is playing our power to the worst hands. And with the passage of my territory to Russia and pretending in the Maybutna of the Russian state, to the territory of the Rudinsky Union in the cordon of 1995, widely there in Moscow. Also, the Kalish of the Rudinsky Republic of Paralyak is not Ukraine, they will come where they are told. Such a rank Putin respects. To fight for the territory of Donbass and to continue the war. And I am also Ukrainian with the fact that it is the territory of the Donetsk region, where the Ukrainian ones are located. Maybe you are for destabilizing the situation in Ukraine yourself with the subsequent conquest of the territory of the Russian state. Well, I already find about the fact that on these temples, the idea ends without such destabilization. And the Russian troops will enter a new operational missile defense to the regions of Ukraine adjacent to the Donetsk region. In the brightness of the territory of Ukraine will be heard, and again not so long, at a peaceful moment. Because it will be through their Sprat mission, in this Riktu company, for their conquest. Here. Then Putin talked for a long time about it happens that a special military operation is called like that. I'm not going to knock about the fact that he has extremely high rates of collapse of Russian screeching strayed. I am the problem of Ukrainian screeching. Describing in absolutely detail, I will not, in principle, the whole story, I basically bring the fact that Putin is not engaged in guilt. About what he says from the 2014 lesson, and 2020 of the other. Dropped, and by the forces of the Russian Federation, it is important to stitch the course of combat ideas in your head. On sprats with numbers tied, and it is true that she stood on the right. And not like the adoration of such and saturated tide from the skin day of living people. Not may Putin needs extremely greedy adoration, of course. That Putin is asking about what he thinks about evil in the telephone scope of Shakov turns from Dmitry. That's about the attack on Dmitriev, on Vitkov about the past. Putin is in the tap, I would say in the traditions of the Cheka, confessing to the rumor of the Maya as if criminally so far. Poured an incredible anecdote for the President of Russia to the rumor and everything. And the point is not that Putin, defending the coils. You know perfectly well that the skin word and in the eyes and ticks will inflame and scandal. And about the fact that I will swim into my mind as an agent of the Russian. As I say, I am not an agent of the Russian influx into the icon of Trump's knitting with the adoration of the American president. Not just Russian, but you are in this situation, and I will impose sanctions against the Russian Federation and military Ukraine. And she lived between the old and Yuri Ushakov. Obviously she was on the side of the special president with the direct on the staff received. In order to wave to her president and not to help Ukraine. Irin explained to Yuri Ushakov, his president, that in the dates of Trump, so of course, it's not working out yet. But Putin's cola, talking about turns, and he says pan turns. That it's a pleasure to put up to his Russian colleagues, and there's nothing. We were diluted with him, got stuck and intelligent. I extremely would have been in mind with Ushakov, barking at us obscene affection, saying that it was extremely welcome, and then arriving, you tried on bags for Polib negotiating positions. I already find that unintelligent and for Mish. Well, I hand over our Ipan to the keel of the Commission, in his friendship with President Trump, tearing off richly, or maybe American, defending the position of his president and his Ukraine. So our dialogue is not simple. So we are in a dialogue without a smile, and without a spit in the water. I am intelligent people. And Kazano defends his position. And defending the position with received in the state, so I batch at them. And so I buy those people from the Russian Federation. Tilky President Trump, from the VIX of the diplomatic environment and the administrative system of the United States in general. Well, supposedly of course, in truth Putin is absolutely right here. A branch protecting American interests, and with President Trump. And President Trump has a lot of American interests, maybe extremely in order to allegedly, of course, criticize the American establishment and destabilize the internal situation. Putin is a well-publicized saboteur, and he is fine, of course, even in such situations. That's offensive is highlighted as an attempt to confiscate Russian assets. It is obvious that Putin will think him right. Don't think about it. Obscenities and negative inheritances to the light of the financial system, discounts to the Vera, to the Eurozone risks, pad risks. And 3 problems in the economy. The locomotive in the European economy is German for the third Reich being in the process, extremely and simple testing. And a number of Russia for Putin's assistant, already plundering the package, goes to Radish and someone else's authority. Then Putin begins to try to turn into a villainess of Ukraine, European villains, into Europeans into Ukrainian in the archives. At every time and for good. We put it that way and they come in public. And I can tell you that the whole of the evening is serious for Putin alone. To what? You can mark him up. Even Ronnie Putin was asking about the confiscation of Russian assets. The Russian president, I say in protest, that he will absolutely not be afraid. That he needs those assets in Zagoli, and he needs the European financial system. I am also paying for the ruination of the European financial system and for the fact that everyone will live happily. Without the European financial system, the collapse of Russian assets and their kind will turn. And so the grandson and Tina for not coming in. Don't you ever do anything like that. Putin is absolutely not doing anything good. I'm heavier than the calls of the top, which is practical. All the Zahidnaya Imperius on the territory of the Russian Federation is confiscated written in 2020 of another rock. And Russia has already given that it is not elected to believe anything to anyone. One more torture in the context of what you happen to be, a tenacious legal testing of a nuclear dump with the received states. And Putin, after all, who has seen rejected information about the American side in Tilky, will be analyzed, and will provide him with positions about what Russia is doing in those situations. One of the propositions of Canada went to Russia on the contrary to the reasonableness of the topics. And Russia is ready for the American administration to think out of all the tortures that strategic stability is hanging out. Well, then, in fact, we can say that Putin does not seriously put up to Trump's poros behind the Rahun. Of course, it's not me yet, as real nuclear tests with the receipt of the state for everything are carried out, and will not be. And they are ready again for Trump's unbuttoned hand to Trump. And you helped him, I would say, a wonderful situation in the American president of such pogroms. With the fact that American Russians are in Moscow, and that allowed the American president to take such a position of Putin. I'll tell you more, you can eventually tell me again, there are dakes, colleagues and I already find about conscientious Telegram channels. They read quotes on Premev's body. The whole appearance of Putin's republic with what Trump is thrown at. That's what he's filthy to say, she's in a pack to create a new paste for him. And what is a honey Pascha? The KGB conceived a Coke at the Radinsky hour, and the Germans came and were rich. In order to compromise such contact. And richly conspiracy theorists once it seemed that Donald Trump is a myth by trap it up to such a honey paste of his stay in Moscow for the sake of. And I think that with the reference book and what we will dilute, that Putin is ready to give Trump poetic messages, in exchange for the fact that I will not be the leaders of Ukraine before, and this is the main idea of the Russian Ochilnik. The main idea of Lubian. Technical styles, discounts are needed for the Ukrainian state, and are often kicked out with Ukraine, in order for the Russian Federation. Food, and you can so quickly comment, Russian journalists are starting to talk about Opal Lavrov. I'm not on the ladders in Dom firm Mark Ruby, guessing how the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation talked to a restrained secretary from the United States. And that the Russian Federation does not elect its maximalist minds. Zakhanchin is the Russian-Ukrainian state secretary, with the blame received in the state. Having informed the president with the information received in the state about what is not needed, not like from an oyster in Budapest. Shaking Putin. Putin is not talking on the Opal ladder, he just has a work schedule. Before the oyster for the American partner. We submit being laurels, the action is present on such oysters, and writes. To what I say so. Putin, who said that he had seen the oysters for the American delegation, had come to Moscow, the Ministry for Cordon certificates. Having named specific officials of both the government administration and Ushakov, they will be seen for contacts with the presidential administration, with Donald Trump's staff. And I did not call the Minister of the off-the-record certificates in principle, and apparently the US Secretary of State, and the national test. And Lavrov can be pushed out of the process absolutely calmly by the fact that Ruby is being tested at once by the national. And he is seen in the American administration, in the Russian administration, by Yuri Ushakov. And Ushakova was also visited by Lavrov. You're talking about Russia on Russia. Tesh is a wonderful torture. You add up the more important thing, is that the enviable side, I'm talking to the correspondents of the TASS agent. Propanuyushi Shvidki from Oyster, straining them closely on Russia and on you for the Crimea. It is known that everyone wants stitches and tortures on endures fuss. It is extremely difficult to fight for another 10. Rocky is looking for all of our Ukraine. The skin directory of the Russian propagandist. There you go. Putin, I will see that we are reading the mind, and ready to delay discounts now. I turned into your car on purpose. The skin test is laid out in those lists, and important meant. The skin key topic, of course, is you serious, and the actions of our partners, you are like what a colleague was trying to drag on the line. She was trying to find out about the position of the American ones. And then Putin, starting to unpack about the line, unpack in detail about the cards. I'll miss some more sprats of disinformation there. I will not be Putin's mouthpiece. I broadcast his misinformation even before the situation at the front, such as in detail rasp on the skin area, knowing the skin detail. I'm alive, I'm driving for the sake of the fact that for him it's just a computer on a nut, and I'm going to cry. And I recall extremely that there will be a collapse of the Ukrainian front. Here and cry in who in the West wants so far, I seems on mutual action from the Ukrainian side. It would still be in the ritual of Ukraine in the form of a collapse of the front. Zach? Then again, and the tirades will continue, there will be a collapse of the front. On the approach, who, of course, to what extent this production runs on the property of combat anchors. On these extortion of the Kiev Regime Act, then, of course. from the front on the plots and the dumping of Ukraine's Zagoli to spend combat duty. May it help you to think about your power with the shaved brushes of the discarded forces. The prefixes seem positive, and it strains the Ukrainians to continue the fighting. About what res fits. And someone attacking Pan and Vitkov, from the point of view of me and reason with the Ukrainian establishment, is a red penny. And I will continue until the uprising of Ukrainians. And I am already a public speaker, saying, in principle, we are up to the fact that Russia is ready. I will continue fighting until the Ukrainians still want so much, and the point of view that Russia is ready to finish this military idea. Then we are stuck to those who are my point of view. I am for the blame. Putin without saying, I would like to try again, to make a new paste Putin wants for Trump. With whom and agreements. And it is also necessary to sign documents with Ukrainian food without Putin. I, a respectful Ukrainian, allowed a principled strategic washing. Kola was afraid to go to the presidential election, after which the president spent in legitimate status. Russia is still in the stage of a reset conflict. From Ukraine. And the Mouse held elections, and presidential elections, and municipal and regional elections were held. And what about him? Of course, I'm not really guilty of this on the territory of Ukraine, on the territory of Russia. And there will be Tilky stacking. We are not the persuasions of character. Combat ideas need the idea of a military camp. Another military camp. Today, the political Ukraine of Ukraine has developed on his. Extremely says Stalin, it does not matter him. Who's there I vote in his who's fucking. Oh, Putin actually wants to influence our elections, our power. Power elections abroad. Well, that's where hearing is important. It is necessary to rent for territorial torture. It is written in the Constitution. And according to the referendum, and are subject to the Constitutional Court. I'll tell you buckets that the Ukrainian Constitution, not allowing greedy referendums and territorial torture. We are a unitary power. Not me in acute Ukraine cannot be, and not like a referendum cannot be on the territory of Ukraine. Bullshit. And for what? In order not to have a constitutional court yet, as can the results of the referendum. That's it. Then he talks about the fact that Tilky is happy. My right to continue my fully important military hour, the president is not from the same, I myself on Sadovo. Especially cannot sign the necessary consti to the court. Well, and such a long story about the head of the constable's court, and the tick for the cordon, they're also stopped letting in the workplace. Consti Court. Head of the Supreme Court entry for corruption. Those who are engaged in corruption have put the head of the Supreme Court on the head of the most corrupt official for corruption. The court has been registered, and new members of the court are needed. Procedures, of course, are not of course. The President of Ukraine can withdraw from the court according to his quota. And the referendum, beneficial to Putin, of the Ukrainian legislation of disintegration. We want from Ukraine, but it's just practical, not legal. Visible who can, who wants, then not high and VD. We need our solution to be internationally triggered by the main international graphs. The axis is all. And my meaning. Then another decision on the right is caused, and let's say the stumps of the territory are under Russian sovereignty. And at times the attack on Russia has been destroyed, and the territories will be turned according to the law to impose in Ukraine. Speech, and we need you knowledge, not Ukraine. We can get Maybit from Ukraine. There are a lot of healthy people there. People want to get out of Russia for a string secondary perspective. He's you, of course, the idea. Putin does not need to be added from Ukraine. I am not a direct Ukraine subject. Adoring that with the received states China of European Ukraine found out. Putin's territory often extends to the Russian Federation. And Ukraine will simply be confronted with facts. The Russian protectors will already pretend to be such a rank in Diakuyu. Well, and that's the whole difficulty of it. It's easier for Putin to speak with the account of Trump's polar plan. It's easier for him to speak from Ukraine. He wants Trump. And the Kola correspondent is testing him. It is also written in Trump's plan that de facto, after receiving the state, he will find out for us. And Yura will not find out legally yet in Crimea and Donbass, now the wall of Russia. And Maya Beauty is the subject of our For the American Side. Turned on Putin extortion. Since receiving the state, I have officially recognized Russia. In the cordons IMU in the Russian constitution. Because of the Rada. And how can the guilt continue in the war? Of course. Telekis firm the United States will be counselors. The Russians also excuse their territory in the Ukrainian occupier. And the territory of Russia. That's Putin's idea, his diabolical plan. Well, it's a political sensation on Ustinek. I'll be tied up as early as Friday. Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of the Cleaning Service, will also walk to Moscow in May. Putin is right on the fact of the visit. And you, of course, are simpler and simpler. Orban and Putin also discuss the knitting test for Maybit plans and Europeans. I will help Ukraine there. I will persuade the trial of the confiscation of Russian assets. And Putin was extremely numb not in the fact that Orban and Xi would negotiate with the Ugric Prime Minister in the Russian Federation. Moments. Of course, Orban is not Trump's plan to negotiate with him. Well, I'll tell you in detail everything about Putin. For an hour, as if you didn't take it, you pass below Putin himself. Why is it all so detailed? That you didn't take and Guchny headline to reality. That Putin is there throwing Trump, that Trump is on him allegedly. And nothing like I'm obviously adoring the president of the Russian Federation with the first American colleague. I obviously adore the Russian President Nelson with a Ukrainian colleague. That supposedly, of course, is not like an oyster and with Putin, and simply cannot. And this is absolutely utopia. Putin can meet with I will still prepare before the surrender, and Trump about the surrender. And Putin will extort such a favor, I will call it legitimate. There we will say there that in those years, Tilky was the president of Ukraine, and the head of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And Tilky was the head of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. There will still be a lot of money from the Russian country. I am still the very idea of the agrarian process, I will say. I am not as objective for a long-term plan between Russia and Ukraine. And at once and maybe the worst hour I will not. How many of you know about such things? Still for humble plans does not create everything without Gluzny illusions. And I think she showed Putin's Promova once again that she is absolutely right. Yak Putin can make plans, and no one knows. But they will simply dilute from the Americans and are pulled. What's the problem? I'm still Trump. The reader said that he does not have a greedy deadline in the whole situation. The fact that he does not think about the fact that you can meet already on the coming torture. Still, I will ask you to subscribe to say. I guess that we literally have 16,000 people, they're completed up to 1 million. I call you to those who are not subscribed to my channel, but 16,000 I of the past have become like this. I last comment, what do you think against a special operation with Pramav and Putin in Bashkent? Well, I will be in the Tesh channel in Diakny, and I will continue to look at the torture. In Europe, in Finland, it will be possible to get to Poland, and what will not pass there, and I still choose in Lisbon. A suitcase litter more Russian missiles fly Trisheki below to Warsaw, Helsinki. So you may not have Russian missiles. I will still be responsible for hanging out with the rocket dump and the process. And the procedure is still in the Europeans of the Minister of the Army with the staff received in the arboretum of his mouth in Kiev. It is also required, of course, that Russia has already been so richly cutting down missiles, that it will jump out on missile guilt from Europe, and that it is necessary to finish the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. It did not scale up. So I'm not sure what you think, that in Finland it can be secured, in Portugal it can be secured. Who told you that in NATO? And I also want you to go to Finland, maybe Russian troops don't come in. And tanks can be found there, and beauty, and in Poland. And maybe a simple infrastructure, in which missile attacks, drone attacks across Europe, in all NATO bases. I also gave you a military facility in Ukraine, you can survive. I still have you in this in Spain, by the military facility you are bent. What's the problem? It's impossible for you to know him now, you must know him. Believe me, he can think with a realistic look at the light, that we have receipts of our share. It's not like I'm not going to tell you a certain geography, we're in the third holy guilt. It can become both victims and a semi-extremely receptive occupation, not for everyone. So just think I will look like yours and your children, and no one saying that you have a PVs in Australia, New Zealand. That you will not become China with the received states. Careless places of whistles, and even careless places, can simply not be but the greatest hour. So it is necessary, of course. Here are those that we are talking about what is in Maybutna. So we can't say anything. I'm a futurologist. Let's get away with another Russian-Ukrainian fault. The whole missile attack on Finland and Poland is over. I demand ranks in Ukraine, just care. I will help to withdraw Shukhity in the state. But this is, of course, a simple speech. The states of Sasha are still a single superpower, the Russian Federation in the light of nuclear extinction. And torture on ticks at the temple in the state in whose state. The CPU of a friend does not give us anything in the States, they sell their whiskey through the Europeans. God is frequent on our reset. C2. 3. This is what we often have to lay down against windy defense. It is received on the staff by the same patriot themselves. It is allegedly chosen to protect an infrastructure facility. And Russia also has missiles, but we still won't mind a windy defense. Next. Honestly, sprats are all reset without Europe. Let's say Samira is a storm, and you will demand American, and Americans Zabaran by the British. I'm not going to kick them there without rockets. So don't think that we can just take and spit, and I wouldn't be happy. And the Europeans are going to get involved with getting a staff, and the paradigm is not there yet, of course. Even with getting the staff, I'm still just going to get out of the situation. On average, an extremely political ideology is attracted to the candle, in that part of the liberal look on the right, of decent-thinking people with a conscience. I think that conscience can be both supposedly simple and folding. I'm into the videos of simple and folding people. And there were people of extreme ideologies with an incredibly cultural candle. Na retinue, na char German writings of Jung, nor writings of Gamson. I am basically the image of the Norwegian soul and conscience. According to Hitler. And I'm such a butt on the German dramaturg's Gaup, mind with Goering getting up a listening Nazi anthem. Well, I'm not going to tell you about the Radisky written and anyone else, but you know everything perfectly well. So not yes, really, a contagion. Nicola's access policy is up to, I would say, a simple kind of behavior at the warehouse without torture. And almost those people themselves voted, and voted on richly seen and seriously. The problem is not with people in new informative technologies. It is logical for an instructor in a Russian situation of an instructor with a drive to arrive before Trump. These are scandals in the Oval Office. But so. And here you are torturing someone. To Namegel's worse, but Trump still needs bags from Ukraine and does not think that it is necessary. Like a scandal in the Oval Office, that you perceive the American grammatical thought and retinue. She is in order to be a friend of Croc Trump. And having unpacked, you don't think so. And the same thing is true of Trump's directives, just are straightforwardly. Valuable amateur activity on the belt, and that's the fallout. It is not in the European Union to believe Putin has not yet Maya Namer attacked the U. And the Zakonkit guilt of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. I respect still Europeans will find. He and everything is fine, of course, they absolutely will not have faith in Putin. And on the right, another hour is needed to reset Europe. The fact that all the military is gone. The Russian Federation, that Radin Union, opposed Western Europe and defended Western Europe with its nuclear parasol. Its bases on the European continent. The Americans defended and extorted in the form of Europeans, the American reset, IK, the payment for the say. And as a result we are still. Once again, it is revealed that Americans are no longer so concerned with the idea of Euro-Atlantic solidarity. We mark the scandalous Munich promo of the vice president with the J received in the state, according to its global reversal. It may be politically, and according to the tick from the Munich promo of Russian President Putin. Europeans need an hour just to get out of the situation. So I think it's clear. Does not give up. Cola we process. Oh. Trump's academic interest in this with Putin has a certain rank of draining the situation, without demonstrating readiness. But maybe Trump will go to drain the future pennies, let's say the cut-off development of the Arctic, access there, I will say. Russian resources close to Trump are rare on land metals, not to say that I will look at the situation in Maybutna. In the eyes of Trump, I wash the vase. In the eyes of Trump. And good food, Yaki is right. So I'm Trumba. That Trump basically thinks in terms of average hive brute force. Power. In the dictates of the little ones. Trump does this to himself. And those frauds are both a power and with Trump, developing a cult of brutal forces, in fact on democratic fields. And of course Putin is fine. It is not yet clear that Putin, while continuing to fight, cannot still use all his strength. Why are you helping us slaughter a cow in order to share it with Trump? I'm still talking about Ukraine already cynically. And also separates them. And served with him podal cow, as respected for the need. And they are ready to see Putin all over the territory of that for that they are ready for the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass. Because for Trump it's just Namaga will do, and in the subject similar to Putin, to Xi Jinping. Including Jack jealous of the greatest democratic power with participation, similar not to those who are gone to the receive the state. And those who get involved with the received states are thrown out of the role of a light leader. That's the happiness of America, and that's our misfortune. And I will be gone for happiness will become happiness. I'm still on Earth in the dark ether, highlighted by today's speech of Russian President Putin in Bishkek, and our desire to figure out what is there and the signals of the richly stepped special apparatuses of the Russian special services, with the so-called Trump plan. Subscribe to the channel, I'll guess another 16,000. It ended in up to 1 million. I ask you, signed 16,000. I'll give you a zats. Put a podobake. Comments still you think about Putin's promova and further development of the situation. Well, it is known. I will be in Diaknaya for the channel and hours for the dropped forces of Ukraine. The distance from our Russian-Ukrainian confrontation will be overestimated by the full guarantor of our sovereignty of independence. And I'll tell you now.